You might be thinking to yourself that this is a big ship, and you'd be right. This is the Diamond Select Art Asylum Star Trek Starship Legends Excelsior NCC-2000. Not, you'll notice, the NX-2000, which is the first registry we see the Excelsior bearing in Star Trek 3 when it's still undergoing trials. And apparently it's also the only ship that we see retaining its original registry when it moves from NX to NCC. So if you're unfamiliar, the NX nomenclature means that it's a sort of a test bed ship. It's the first in its line. It's sort of getting ready to become a mainline design in use with the Federation. And I think the Defiant also had an NX registry, as did the Enterprise when it was in the TV series Enterprise, because that was the NX-01. So that was the test bed for the Warp 5 drive. Now, not dissimilarly, this Excelsior class ship was going to be, well, it was the test bed for a trans-warp drive, which was in theory going to allow it to break all the speed limits previously set by the Constitution class Enterprise. However, former chief engineer of the Enterprise, Montgomery Scott, was able to disable the Excelsior simply by pinching some computer chips out of it, which disabled said transwarp drive, which was totally reliant on those chips for being able to attain its theoretical maximum speeds. And once that had happened, either directly or indirectly, that resulted in the shelving of the transwarp drive program. So what happened with the Excelsior is that it was still a massive ship. It was bigger than the Constitution class Enterprise, but it basically got downgraded with a normal warp drive. It then entered service around sort of the 2290s with one Hikaru Sulu as its captain. So the guy who'd been the captain for the NX version of the ship didn't take it forwards to its operational lifetime, and Sulu got it instead, basically. Now, I have not got this example from Diamond Select out of the box, so I don't actually know if it's working. The Try Me has probably long since expired. So I am going to do a little bit of an unboxing here for you and for me, because I haven't actually got it. So this being a Star Trek Starship Legends version of a Diamond Select ship, as is mentioned on the front here, it's going to feature phrases from The Undiscovered Country, because that was when we saw Sulu flying it for the first time. And in fact, the Undiscovered Country, which is Star Trek 6, actually features the Excelsior quite heavily, and it's in the opening credits and the opening sort of role of the Undiscovered Country. So on the back here, well, let's have a look at the slide first. We have authentic sound effects and movie dialogue, which is what sets these later Starship Legends ships apart from the earlier Art Asylum ships that didn't do voice effects. We've got light up warp engines, which actually only came when it appeared in Voyager, I believe, which it also did. So unusually, it was a crossover ship between Voyager and the Star Trek movies. We've got main deflector, impulse engines, and impulse deflection crystals, which I think just is a fancy way of saying impulse engines. Or possibly those bits there. So, USS Excelsior, NCC-2000, electronic starship, length 467 meters, 34 decks, 607 crew, max speed warp 9.3. And I imagine that's warp 9.3 on the next generation warp scale, rather than the original series warp scale, because otherwise that doesn't sound quite as impressive. You might not be able to read this actually. I'll just read out the blurb here because it's an interesting background. The USS Excelsior was the first in a new class of Federation starship, larger than the existing Constitution class. It was originally intended to possess transwarp drive, making it capable of greater speed than any other Federation vessel, but the great experiment ultimately failed after a series of trials under its first commander, Captain Styles. Refitted with standard warp engines, the Excelsior went into service in 2290 under the command of Captain Hikaru Sulu, formerly of the Enterprise. Following the ship's initial 3-year scientific mission, the Excelsior was involved in the battle at Kitama against an experimental new Klingon bird of prey. With the new design deemed a success, new ships in this class were greenlit, including the new Enterprise B, and the Excelsior class soon became one of the most widely used designs in Starfleet, remaining in service for nearly a century. And we do of course see this ship in certainly in Deep Space Nine very widely, and possibly even towards the end of Voyager as well, briefly. So, you know, it becomes a real sort of workhorse of the Federation. But it was built at a time when the Klingon conflict was still live. So she packs a serious punch, as well as, you know, originally having been intended to be extremely quick. So let's have a dig into her, and we'll just see if she's actually up and running. Nice to get one in this condition in the box, and I'm hoping there's a stand in here as well, of course, because there should be. Let's see if I can shuffle her out in a sensible fashion. And interestingly, I have had a few comments against some of the other videos about the Diamond Select ship, saying that their electronics are dubious. Now, I don't know whether that's truer of the later ships than the earlier ships. I've certainly happily resurrected the older ships without too much difficulty, and they've always seemed to want to come to life quite happily. So, you know, we'll see how we get on with this one, I guess. So here we go, nice sturdy sort of inner lining. And this is the slightly improved version of the stands that they have as well. So this stand is a sort of a two-sided stand rather than the rather flimsy one-sided ones that you get with the Enterprises. And you get this nice sort of solid, chunky Federation symbol base stand as well for it to sit on. And here we don't have that ball joint issue that we had with the Enterprises. There is a ball joint in there, but it's now covered by this vertical sort of insert that you can just put straight into the bottom of the ship. So that should just clip in there quite happily, like that. I've actually got a spare one of these. I'm not sure what it's for. I don't know, actually, no, I think I do know. So let's get her out and have a look. They're always quite surprisingly light. I'm used to the Eagle Moss models, which were always quite heavy because they're die cast. And although there's quite a lot of volume to this nevertheless obviously is not die cast. It's primarily plastic. But you can see there, you know, the detailing is good. This is all. I think this is. No, that is actually painted on. I was thinking that was decals initially, but it's not, I don't think. Now, you've seen in the previous video that I've got an Ertl version of this ship, which had the registry rather strangely of NCC-2000, which apparently was because Ertl produced it quite early on and they hadn't really finalised things completely. But I used to run around with these and use the Excelsior as my sort of Enterprise substitute because I didn't have an Enterprise. And initially, and I know this is somewhat ironic given my my username for this channel, and indeed one I've used for many years, I wasn't always enamoured of the Excelsior as a ship because it always seemed quite chunky compared to the Enterprise. The Enterprise seemed to work better to my mind. But nevertheless, I have grown to appreciate the Excelsior, I think, more so perhaps, because it was such an enormous ship, and it finally gets to earn its stripes in Star Trek VI by becoming an alternate target and saving the Enterprise A and giving Kirk and Spock and Bones actually a chance to modify a torpedo so they can actually finish the bird of prey off. So, but for the arrival of the Excelsior at its full normal standard speed, the Enterprise might not have survived, and the Kittimer Accords might never have been signed. So it's a very important ship. So I'm just going to add some batteries, and we'll see if the electronics are in fact working. Well, I don't normally pause my sort of battery insertion midway through, but intriguingly, this has got a sort of a completely separate little battery tray, which I've just slid out from sort of in here. So they've used the depth of the primary hole here for the battery compartment, because of course it does thin down a lot at the tail end. Hadn't really occurred to me that structurally it's not really lending itself to putting batteries in. So I guess that what I'm doing is I'm just slotting it all the way back in here. Yep, that's trying to light up, so I think I've got battery power there. And then the actual, this cover then actually sort of goes back inside the ship almost to cover the batteries. So that's a very, very different approach to what I've seen them do before, but I think it's just necessitated by the design of the Excelsior class itself. I'm smiling to myself as well, because I'm just noticing now that there are quite a lot of screw covers on this ship as well, which I've commented on the Playmates versions of these ships, that the Playmates versions do not make any attempts to hide their screws where they're used to keep the ship together, whereas the Diamond Select models do that. So they present much better as models for that very reason, because they do actually try and hide the screws that are keeping the whole thing together. It takes a bit of doing to get this back down, actually. I'm going to get it all the way, but I can see now why it is sort of protruding more than you might expect, because it's just not. It's adopting the curvature of the lower hull to hide the battery compartment. So I think that'll do for these purposes. That has actually ended up quite flush. So I think what I'll do is I'll attach it to a stand, and we'll see if I turn the lights off. Let's hope that it does actually achieve some semblance of life. Let's have a look. Just kill some of these lights. This might make life interesting, but let's go with this. Okay. So I would imagine that, as with most Diamond Select ships, you just press the bridge. Right, let's try this again. Right, let's just try that again with a completely fresh set of batteries, give or take. Yes, you have.
Target that explosion and fire. Nice to see you in action one more time, Captain Kirk. Captain's log, USS Excelsior. Sulu commanding. On screen, magnify. Shields.
So I think that's the full range. I'm having a look if the navigational deflector lights up. Oh, it does. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's actually got a lot of lights, and they are pretty bright. I suspect you'd probably see those even with my sort of normal lights on. Let's just bring us up to full brightness again, and we'll just see.
Don't tell me that was any meeting show.
Yeah, they definitely do. They do pop pretty well.
Help engage.
Yeah, that's quite impressive. I mean, it's definitely the way with this that you've got to have very fresh batteries in there. I don't think it would tolerate anything less than that, but it's doing quite a lot of hard work. There's quite a lot of light for it to bring up there. It's got the twin impulse engines, which are nice. It's got the warp nacelles, and it's got a navigational deflector and these two little lights on top there, which I think are connected with the impulse system. So all in all, and the audio, of course. That's going up to warp. I don't think we ever saw her fire phasers in the course of the film. She might have done in Voyager. Apparently, they didn't use the original model in Voyager. They used a sort of a scaled down version of it. But this was the base model for the Enterprise B in Generations. And it made me chuckle the other day, actually, because I realised that Generations is actually the only film that features two Enterprises in it. Because you get the Enterprise B at the start, but then of course you get the Enterprise D later on. And that's probably the only time that happens in any of the films where you actually see two Enterprises within the same film. I'm trying to think if I'm wrong about that, but no, because 6 was the Excelsior and the A. Yeah. So I suppose the only exception would be the Fleet Museum in Picard, but that's not in the film, so I'm not going to count that. Simples. But, you know, that's a really, really nice model. You might be wondering how long it is. Does it announce that on the box, I wonder? No, interestingly, it doesn't. The Art Asylum versions did. I'm just going to have a quick look, actually, to see if it's actually got an official... I say official, it's got a year on the box. So now this is dated 2017. So this is only 7 years old, actually. This could be the youngest one that I've got. That's really interesting, actually. I'm surprised at that in a sense, because I knew that they'd reissued some of these after their original releases, but that seems incredibly late in terms of... So they must have been releasing these for, what, sort of 12, 13 years in various different guises. So I'm actually quite surprised by that, really. What was I going to do? I was going to try and get a measurement on it, wasn't I? Unfortunately, I don't seem to have blessed myself with a tape measure on this occasion, which is unusual because I do normally have one lying around when I'm doing this sort of thing. I'll just go and find one for the sake of completeness, because it's relevant in the sense of scale, but then none of these toys really tend to scale with each other. Okay, so tip to tail, we've got, that's a good 18 inches of Starship there, from the tip of one nacelle up to the top of the saucer section there. So that's 1.5 feet of Starship. And that was the thing about the Excelsior. You can tell it's a ship built for cinema, because all of the cinema ships are longer than they are wide, apart perhaps from the Enterprise, but obviously they'd already established that one, so they couldn't do that much with it. But the Excelsior is designed to fit a sort of a 16:9 kind of screen ratio, isn't it, when you think about it? I always thought that it was a bit spindly in some respects, but I guess that's probably why they went for it in that way. But I say it's spindly, and yet obviously this is intentionally, it's much, much larger than the Constitution class. So I love the shot at the end of Undiscovered Country where you see them sort of splitting away from each other. The Excelsior is kind of peeling off, and you realise that it is, as McCoy says, it's a big ship. And she may not be as big as her captain, but then that's not hard because he's quite ickle, bless him. But don't tell him that. So, you know, I mean, and we see this in various sort of upgraded forms. Obviously, I mentioned the Enterprise B, but we also understand that one of these gets upgraded into the Lakota, which takes on the Defiant in Deep Space Nine. So, you know, they're around for a long, long time, as most Federation ships are. And they see service in various conflicts, doing various things, but it's just a very, very classic development of the typical sort of Federation design with the twin nacelles, the saucer section. But interestingly, and this is what I always find fascinating about Star Trek, it's the way in which you see this sort of evolution of the designs, and you kind of wonder how much they actually planned these sort of things. Because if you think about this in the Sovereign class, you can see that the spindly neck kind of idea is already degrading here, because the Excelsior has this incredibly thick neck, which is this strange sort of radiator sort of style approach to life, which is at the time I thought was really odd, because it's like, well, why does it look like that? Because it's radically different from what the rest of the hull looks like for no apparent reason. But it does mean that you can do a lot more, and it's a much less weak point than was the case on the Constitution classes, for example. And of course, ironically, in one of the later, sort of newer reimagined films, if you like, we see that can be a lethal weakness for an Enterprise as a Constitution class vessel. So actually, the Excelsior being sort of squatter like this is actually a good defensive measure for it, because it makes it much, much harder to inflict critical damage, albeit the nacelles and the nacelle pylons are still a very, very weak point, arguably. But that is the USS Excelsior from Diamond Select, and I do think it's a rather lovely ship. The stand is good because they've upgraded the stand from the Enterprises. You can actually have, the sound effects are really good. And once you get them up and running, they're very, very good sound effects as well. So you really can't knock it in that sense at all, I don't think. So we're interested to see, what you think of this as a sort of a concept ship. And as I say, I don't know if this was the absolute last thing that Diamond Select released when they were doing Starships. I think some of the San Diego Comic-Con specials might have come out after this, because I seem to remember that I've seen the Romulan Bird of Prey that's sort of semi-cloaked was, I think, a 2018 release. So maybe they were releasing these for nearly sort of 15 years when all said and done. But yeah, I think I'll just show you one more thing. So, by way of comparison, this is the Eaglemoss XL USS Excelsior. And it was actually one of the very early Eaglemoss ships that I picked up because it was on offer at the time. And the coloration is subtly different in the Eaglemoss, but the overall sort of detail is they're not too far off each other, really. So if I take you up here, you can see that the Eaglemoss has got quite a high level of detail as they tend to have, but this XL Eaglemoss is only about half the size of the much, much larger Diamond Select, as you can see. But you can see that, whereas this has gone for slightly sort of plainer detailing, it's a plainer white. You've got more of what I believe is known as Aztecing on the hull of the Eaglemoss version, and just as the colours are pretty similarly handled, actually. It's just more of a sort of turquoise nacelle colouring, and just generally just a bit more sort of overall skin detail, but they're not sort of radically different at the end of the day. But I just thought it might be interesting to see those two alongside each other for, just for general comparison and purposes, and the difference in scale, really, as much as anything else. So, the Eaglemoss ones do look great when they're lined up together, but if you want a single point of interest kind of ship, the Diamond Select is not half bad. It really, really isn't. So I'll leave you there for this one. This might be the last one I do this year. I'm taking myself up to Christmas here, and I'll probably have a little bit of a break over Christmas. So in the new year, I will still be showing you the original series movie ships, because there are still various different toy examples of them that I have. And some of them are not by people that you might necessarily expect to be doing them either, which is, different. But I've also got some of my all-time favourite ships, the birds of prey, from Diamond Select, and I can legitimately show you them because they are, at least one of them is, the original series Bird of Prey. I mean, obviously the Bird of Prey has had a very, very long history across many of the Star Trek shows. It's probably appeared in pretty much every single Star Trek genre going in one guise or another. But the ones I'll be showing you are the classic sort of Burrell and Cavort class types of birds of prey that have been released by many, many people over the years in various different scales and various different sort of, if you like, form factors. So we will get to those, but that will probably be in the space year 2025. So Merry Christmas to you, if it's still that time of year. If not, ignore that bit, and I'll see you in the new year. Cheers for now.